Earlier this year, I had a video where I listed my goals for 2024. Now here at the bottom, one of my goals was to make a crumb quilt. I have been working on trying to come up with a block that will work for a crumb quilt, and I think I found the perfect block. What makes it perfect is it's super fun to do. There's no specific pattern. It's very forgiving, and it is tons of fun to make. Hello everybody, this is Michelle Fox and welcome to The Simple Quilter. Today's topic is making a fantastic scrap block or crumb block out of scraps. Now I have to say this is the funnest, perhaps the funnest block I think I may have ever made. It's so exciting to make these and they're so easy. Behind me you can see 5 of the blocks that I've made, and I decided to make them all in specific color ways, each individual color ways, and they're so much fun. Here's one close up. This was the last one I did. This is a pink block. This is going to make such a bright, fantastic quilt, and I've been using my scraps. All I did was get in my scrap bin. I had a little bit of yardage that I had for the background fabric, but I just got in my scrap bins, and have I ever had fun. These are rather large crumbs. I had really intended to make a crumb quilt using small pieces, but I really don't have a lot of little tiny pieces. They're all more larger, kind of larger strips and pieces of fabric. So this is my crumb / scrap quilt, and I'm working on my goal for 2024. If you're enjoying this content, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. I'm so excited to show you how to make this simple, quick, and easy block. So here we go. The first thing I did is to cut 12-inch foundation squares. I just used some white fabric I didn't have any muslin, but you can use muslin. In fact, I've ordered some more muslin because I love doing these blocks and I want to make a bigger quilt. So I cut the squares, and I cut them 12 inches so I could trim them down to the 11 inches that I wanted. For this middle piece right here, I had some white fabric that has a little needles and thread on it. I don't know if you can see that since that's white on white, but I just cut a bunch of odd shapes, and I like for the shapes to have angles, so I cut plenty of those out of some scraps that I had. I then went to my scrap bins, and I wanted to do each block with one color. So this is my pink and purple bins, and I just pulled out scraps that I thought I could use. Here are the scraps that I picked out for my pink block. That's the one I'm going to show you how to make, and I'm going to show you how to start this block. Here's my foundation block, and this is the right side of my fabric, so I'm just going to put a little bit of glue. I love using fabric glue. I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on there, and I'm just going to glue that down. Now these scraps, I did press these and I trimmed up the edges. I didn't cut them a certain width. You can see some of them are more narrow than the others, but I did trim off the frayed edges. And all I'm going to do is start sewing these pieces on. Now, there's this piece, this pink piece is a little bit bigger, but I'm going to try to just start my seam right there and end right there. And if I have a little extra over, that'll be okay because I'll be able to trim that up. And I'm just going to sew a 1/4 of an inch seam right across there. You can see I've sewed across there, and I try to keep the threads trimmed as I go. Now I'm going to take this to the iron, and I'm just going to press it back just like that. Next, I'm going to just start auditioning pieces for my next piece. I think I'm going to use this one. And I'm just going to sew from here down to here. I'm going to trim those threads. Just easy to do quickly. Now, before I do any more, I'm going to fold this back and I'm going to trim off this extra. Now, on occasion, I have to rip out a couple of stitches. But I try to be careful where I stop. See, I stopped right there, right at the end of that. And I'm going to press this back. You can sew these strips on in any order that you want. Here, you can see I started here. No, you can see let's see. You can see I started here, and then here, here, and here. And I went around. On this one, you can see I started here, added this piece, and then I added this one. On this one, I added the top and the bottom and then the sides. So there's no set rules. You can add them in any order that you want to. I'm going to sew this piece on next, and when I select a piece, I want to be sure it does cover, you know, all of the piece there. Now the only piece I really need to trim on this one is this little piece right here. Now you don't absolutely have to trim those pieces. You'll have a little bit more thickness there, and you don't have to use the iron to press, but I really am a presser, so I am going to go press that. These blocks are so much fun to make. I'm so surprised at how much fun I've had doing these. Now my goal this year was to do a crumb block. I don't know if this is really considered a crumb block or a scrap block. Now I thought it was more of a crumb block, but crumbs I think might be smaller pieces. But anyway, this is my crumb slash scrap block. And I am really enjoying how these are coming out. And I really like doing the blocks in color groupings, like all pinks, purples, blues, yellows. I think this is going to make a beautiful quilt. Now I'm just going to keep adding until this whole foundation piece is full. Now right here you can see I had to loosen a stitch right there. But I just try to be really careful when I sew so I'm not having to rip out a bunch of seams. And when you cut this, you want to be sure that you don't cut through your foundation piece. And I'm just going to finish adding all the way around. Now on this one you can see I'm going to have to rip out some seams there. This one's not going to have to be ripped out, but I am going to rip this little bit out right here. And it doesn't take very long to do this. Just enough so that I can pull that back enough to trim it. Now on this one I'm going to have quite a bit to trim. I'm going to use my larger ruler for that. Just going to trim all that off. I love that fabric. It's so cool. Okay, I kept going around and around till it's all done there. Now, you'll see here and here there's a little bit left and a little bit left here, but since I'm going to trim it down to 11, it will all work out. I'm just going to trim it so I don't have to worry about those. And again, I'm trimming this down to 11. Wow, that block turned out great. The last thing I'll do is I will do a little stay stitch all around the edge, and you can see how I did that here. That just helps things keep things in place, and I always like to do that, and it will help keep the blocks from stretching out of shape. Now I have a few tips for you as you're making these. Number one is I do use a walking foot. I use a walking foot a lot of times when I sew. The second tip is I think the blocks turned out better when I had more contrast. For example, these dots and this plaid and this white, and in this one the stripe and the circles and the leopard print, versus like this one. At a distance, this just looks almost solid yellow except for these three pieces here. And I wish I would have added more contrast to the yellow block. I'm still going to use it. I still think it's beautiful, but I do think that's important. Another tip I wanted to give you is I did decrease my stitch size to 2.0 because I wasn't really back tacking anywhere, but all the seams crossed, so that will help. And my last tip is don't get hung up on where you're placing them, which one looks best. Just sew and have fun. This was one of the funnest, most liberating blocks I've sewn in quite some time. And I think they're turning out to be wonderful. I love these beautiful, colorful blocks. I hope you'll give these blocks a try. They are so much fun to make. I have a lot more to make because I want to make a larger quilt, but I've got a good start on this, and I hope you'll give this crumb quilt a try. Now, I haven't figured out my layout. Perhaps that'll be for another video later. Until next time, have fun quilting.